Hello, in today's little tutorial we're just going to be looking at how to resize simple patterns. So this skill builder is all about changing the size and the dimensions of simple patterns. So we're talking about kind of 2D patterns like the pickles pouches. So this is the one that I'm going to show you how to alter in this video, and I've made this pickles pouch 2 inches wider and 1 inch taller than the original pattern. So this little skill builder session is going to show you how to change the size or change the dimensions of simple patterns like this, where you've got a 2D shape, you haven't got any kind of gusset or box corner to it, just a real lovely simple pattern, so that if you find something nice and easy that you want to sew, maybe a little freebie pattern or the pickles pouches or something similar, you can change the dimensions of it so they can suit you perfectly. So let's get started. What you'll need is a ruler, a paper rotary cutter or paper scissors, I tend to use both, pencil and a roll of tape. And I've also got some spare paper. Now I'm using, this is children's craft paper here. It comes in a big roll, it's dead cheap, so that's why I use it. Now I've cut out, with the pickles pouches, I've cut out the rectangle as the pattern describes. Now this is a great one to show you on, because this is such a simple pattern. So I've just cut out the rectangle and then I've laid on my template. This pattern only comes with the curve of the flap as the printed template. Now, if you want a really easy way to do this, all you do is you line it up and you tape it along as like a sort of a hinge. And then you can just whiz along underneath, cut this extra paper off. It doesn't really have to be particularly neat. And then you've got your template there like that. You don't have to worry about tracing it onto the paper and getting it accurate. You can just make sure that as long as you're lined up on the edge of the paper before you trim it, then you know that this is going to be the perfect length, and that's your template nicely done. The other thing I've done on this one as well is I've marked in where my snaps are going to go based on the pattern. Okay, so if you're doing a simple pattern like this and you just want to change the dimensions of it, if there's markings, then add those on now before we do anything else. The work we're going to do on the paper is going to translate then into the pattern later, but for now we're just going to work on the paper. So first thing you're going to want to do after you've got your template all set out nice and neat and you've put your markings on is mark your centres. Now if you're using a pattern where it hasn't got the whole piece, it's just got the fold line, then you're already, you know, one step ahead of us. Okay, so don't panic too much. So all I'm going to do is just cut this along those centre marks so that I've just got half of the pattern piece. And I'm using I've got a paper blade in this rotary cutter, which is the same as a regular blade, except it's one that I've used and used and used and used and used, and it's gone a bit blunt, so I've put it in as a paper blade now. Right, so we've got half our pattern. This half is what we're going to work on. If you find it easier to cut out with the whole of the pattern, then I'll show you how to do that. If you are using a pattern that's only got half of the pattern, then I'll show you that as well, just to make it nice and easy. So this is our pattern, and you can find out the finished dimensions of your pattern on the front cover or on the cover of your, or in the item description if you're not using one of my patterns. I think that I want to make this approximately, well I say approximately, we're going to measure it and it's going to be exactly 2 inches wider. That's 5 centimetres wider. So I need to add 2 inches into the width of this. So I'll show you what that looks like on my mat. I would always recommend doing this on a mat with marked out measurements, so you can visualise how big that's going to be. So I think 2 inches wider would be perfect for what I need for my, this is going to be a gift for somebody. So if I'm using the whole pattern piece, what I need to do is add 2 inches into the width of this pattern piece. If I'm using a half pattern piece, so one that's got the fold on it, I'm only going to need to add 1 inch, because that will take us to the centre then, and we'll use that as our fold line. So whatever you're doing as the whole piece, if you're only going to use half the piece and use the fold line, then halve whatever extra width you want to add. So in my case, I want to add 2 inches to my width. So if I'm going to use this whole piece, I'll add 2 inches into the middle. But if I'm only going to use half the piece and cut it on the fold, I'm only going to add in 1 inch. And then that 1 inch, when cut on the fold, will equate to 2 inches. Okay, so I've got my big roll of paper here. Now I'll show you how to do this, because sometimes it's not quite as obvious as we designers think it is. So using my pencil, I'm going to draw a line, and I'm just going to draw it about 1 inch away from the edge of the paper. That's approximately 2.5 centimetres. I should move up a bit actually. It's not very easy to do a straight line right on the edge. And I'm doing it longer than I need, and then I know that at least I've got a bit of extra wiggle space. Okay, now I always do it about 1 inch in, because that gives you a bit of extra wiggle space then. Then I'm going to add on whatever extra width I want to add to my patterns. So in this case, I'll draw it 2 inches away, or 5 centimetres away. And then I'll draw another line 1 inch away the other side. Okay, so the inches each side are just sort of hanging on space. They're the extra that you're going to tape your pattern to. So I could now cut that along that far away line. So I've got 1 inch either side, and then the extra 2 inches in the middle. That's the 2 inches that I want to add into my pattern. So then when I come to tape it on, obviously I need to cut an end. All I'm going to do is line this up with my 1 inch line there, and then line this up with my other end of my 2 inches line, and I can tape that into place, and I've got a pattern piece then that measures the 2 inches. The only reason for this second line here is just so you can cut along there, so you've got a bit of overlap. Okay, so that's if you're using a all-in-one pattern piece like this. So if you like your pattern pieces to be full size, that's what you're going to do. In fact, let me do that, and then we know where we're coming from. So I've got a nice straight edge there, so let's measure how much I need. Let's go to there, and I'll cut this down to size. In fact, I'm going to cut this along the whole width of the paper, and then I know that that is the right length. Okay, so I'm going to cut along this line so I can show you what it is I've just been talking about. Sometimes it's easier to see things, isn't it, than just have them described. Right, so we can discard the rest of that paper, except we won't, will we, because we'll use it again on something else. Right, so I've got 1 inch either side and 2 inches in the middle. So when I come to tape this into place, I'm going to line up my ends, line it up along that first line, tape that into place, and then line up this second piece, make sure they do match. You don't want to curve one end and a straight end the other end, and tape that into place. And then I've got my, if that's not quite matching, just pull it up so it does match, and then you can trim off the bottom afterwards. And then I've got my enlarged pattern piece there. Okay, and you can just take that into place. Now if you're using just half a piece and you've got your fold line, then I make a 1 inch line just for a bit of overlap. Okay, now we're only adding 1 inch onto the centre, aren't we, if we're doing a fold line, or 2.5 centimetres, because it's going to be doubled when you fold it over. So that's all I'll do. And in fact, I'll just cut along there, seeing as I've got that in the right place. So So all you need on this piece of paper is 1 inch either side of the line, and then you're going to get half your pattern piece. So this will be the piece with a fold on it. Line that up along the 1 inch line, your overhang line. Make sure that you remember which bit is your overhang line, which bit is your extra line, and you'll tape that into place. And then you're going to use this top edge as your new fold line. I like to draw a fold arrow on there just to be sure that I remember, because chances are I'll step back, go and do something else, come back to it and forget what I've done. So all you do is just tape this into place along that line. So instantly my pattern piece is 1 inch wider, and that's all we need to worry about, and we can carry on with our pattern as it is, because this one's a really simple pattern. It's very basic. Okay, so that would be for my if I'm doing it on the fold, and then this one would be if we're doing it as an all-in-one piece. It's a bit trickier to do now that I've already taped it on, but you get the idea. You wouldn't cut this one on the fold, you'd cut this as an all-in-one piece, like so, with the extra 2 inches in the middle there. And then all that you need to do with the measurements for your markings is just transfer these to your fabric. You don't need to do any extra calculations because you've already added the extra into the middle here. You can just follow the pattern as far as that goes. Okay, hope that makes sense. That's how to add the extra width onto your pattern. So if you'd like to add extra height to your pattern, this is where you're going to need to cut along the center and add extra height in here. Okay, and again we'll do it on the paper pattern piece, so that we're doing all our calculations, all of our workings out before we cut into our fabric. Now with this one, I'm just going to use the half pattern piece for this one, and because this pattern is all 3 parts in one, so you've got the front, the back and the flap in one, we're just going to treat this as one pattern piece and add everything we need into the center of this one pattern piece. So I'm folding this in half to find the center line. Okay, whenever you're altering patterns, really you should be doing it from the center, and then you know that it's all going to work out as it should. Add a bit of extra tape in there. Right, so I folded it in half. Let's cut it in half, add a few pencil marks in there. It's a bit hard to see under these lights where my fold line is. Okay. Right, now I think I am going to add an extra 1 inch to the height of my pouch. That's 2.5 centimeters. But there are 3 pattern pieces in this one paper pattern piece. You've got the front of the pouch, the back of the pouch and the flap. So I'm going to need to add, if I want my whole pouch to be 1 inch taller overall, I'm going to need to add 3 inches altogether. That's 7.5 centimeters. So all I'm going to do, exactly the same as we did before, let's get our piece of paper out, and this time I'll make sure it's the right width. Getting a few extra pieces of paper here. Right, so I'm just trimming this down so it's the right width, so we're not contending with lots of big pieces of paper here. Now I'm going to add a line 1 inch away, as I did before, just so that we've got an overlap, a bit of a flap. And then, because I'm adding 1 inch to the height, so I need to add 3 inches in total, I'm going to draw a line 3 inches away from that. There we go. And then another 1 inch line. So I've got whatever extra I want to add, I've got an inch either side. And I'll trim that down to size, and then it'll be a little bit easier to see. I'm using my paper rotary blade. Right, so on this I've got 1 inch as an overhang, 1 inch as an overhang and 3 inches extra, which is what I want for my height. So now I can get the bottom piece of my pattern piece and line it up with that 1 inch line, that overhang line, and tape it into place. Now in this pattern, because it's such a simple shape, you don't even have to worry about where your snaps are going to go, because you've marked that on the pattern. You'll just transfer that as you're sewing. And then I'll get the top half and make sure that your fold arrow is on the same side and tape that into place. The other side of this 3 inches. So underneath my pattern pieces, and I'll turn it over and show you in a sec. Underneath I've got 1 inch of overlap, just to give it a bit of stability and something to hang on to. So that's my 1 inch lines. And then on the front I've got 3 inches extra that we've added in here into our pattern piece. So all I'm going to do now is use that as my full pattern piece, folding on the line here. Okay, so I'm going to fold my fabric in half and then put this edge on the fold. Now if you wanted to do an all-in-one pattern piece, the process is exactly the same, and then you would just add your 3 inches to the two sides. So first of all you'd add your, no, I was forgetting something. First of all you add to your middle, doesn't matter which order you do this in, as long as you work from the centres. It doesn't matter if you do vertical or horizontal first. So we just add to one side first and then cut that in half and add your 3 inches into the middle, or whatever distance it is that you want to increase it by. Okay, so I'll show you on this one as though you're doing the full size pattern piece, because quite a few patterns or simpler patterns like this do come with full size pattern pieces. Okay, so all we're doing, we've added onto our width. I'm going to fold this back on the extra that we added. So don't get confused. I'm showing you two different methods here for doing your pattern pieces on the fold or the full size. Okay, so we would add to our centre first. And let's add this other side to this pattern piece. So I've got my 2 inches wider in the middle there that we did already. And then we're going to add the 3 inches into the middle. And I would need to make a larger template for this, obviously, a full width template. And then I would just add my 3 inches in all the way along here. So your template's going to be the full width of this. Add your 3 inches in. So in total, you've got this centre panel has been added on, and this centre panel has been added on. And that is going to give you an extra 2 inches in width and an extra inch in height overall. Okay, I'll come back and show you how this has turned out after I've sewn this up, cut this out of my interfacing and sewn it up. Okay, but that's how you add extra into a simple pattern like this. So here's my finished pouch that I've made wider and slightly taller. I made it quite a bit wider than I did taller, and I love the finished size of that. I think that's great. I'm going to use this as a Christmas gift. I'm going to add some makeup bits to it and give it to my niece. I've used this copper and black fabric on the outside and this coated cotton on the inside, which is water resistant, and then I used orange snaps for it. So I hope she likes it. And if you want to alter the size of a simple project like the pickles pouch, then I hope you'll consider using my tutorial. Thanks for watching.